702.
The Big Interview
With Bongani Bingwa.
In 2019, the Mpumalanga Public Works Department embarked on an ambitious project to build a smart school in a rural part of the province. It was to be completed within 18 months, and the projected cost was 225 million rand. 6 years and nearly 700 million rand later, it has finally been announced as ready to operate. COVID-19, bad weather, geological challenges, subcontracting disputes, pandemic shutdowns, weather-related damage are some of the key reasons officials have given for the cost overruns. In 2021, for example, the project stalled and ran out of funds. And by the time construction resumed, what little had already been built had fallen prey to vandalism and needed to be repaired. We've invited the Education MEC in Mpumalanga, Lindi Masina, to join us to explain. A very good morning to you, MEC, and welcome to our program.
Hey, very good morning, Bongani. Thank you very much.
I would suspect that even hearing my introduction must make you wince a little.
Very much so, Bongani, because now when I listen to your introduction, I realize that you have invited a very wrong person for the information that you want to share with our community. Because like you have already said, I'm MEC Education. My core business is learning and teaching. I can tell you more about the schools that have been handed over to me. How are they running? But in terms of the implementation of the building of the project, this is a very wrong MEC.
You might have some information, though, that could be useful to us now that we have you. For example, I would expect you to know what the total cost of the project has been thus far.
Yes, I did know that it went up to about 600 million. But of course, the glitches and the issues along, the technicalities along, those are the real issues for the Department of Public Works.
No, I understand. I appreciate that clarification. I'm just saying, now that you are here, maybe you can give us one or two things that you do know. So the cost so far is how much?
Bongani, please, I'm begging you. You know, I've taken this, interview because I thought in the main the interview was based on the functionality of the boarding schools or the schools across the province.
Yeah.
But in terms of the implementation of any of the building of the schools, I might mislead you, I might give you the wrong information. Hence, I'm requesting that information can be solely sourced from the Department of Public Works.
So you can't commit to a number of how much it has cost
No.
so far. Okay.
No.
Is
not
the work completed? Can you tell us that?
Yes, the work has been completed. As we speak, the learners are learning, the teachers are teaching. We have been handed over the school by the Department of Public Works now that the children have been placed since the 19th of July. When the school resumed on the 22nd of July, the classes, the teaching and learning took place at that particular school. That I can confirm.
What's the capacity of the school? Do you know?
Yes, it's about 1,200. It can accommodate 1,200 learners. But at this present moment, I can confirm that we have accommodated 425 learners, out of which they were coming from the schools that were closed, those farm area schools that were not, viable enough for learning and teaching to take place effectively. The department took a decision that we are going to close those schools so that at least they can be accommodated in that boarding schools. And of course, now that the period of registration is taking place, we are going to accommodate more learners, especially those that will be coming from those disadvantaged areas.
Do you know how many teachers you have at the school?
Right now, we've got 425 learners.
Teachers, do you know how many teachers you have?
Yeah, I think teachers, they are 19, if I'm not mistaken. I can just safely confirm that, but I think we've got 19 teachers.
All right. I suppose part of the reason we wanted to speak to you, and I know you probably won't want to answer this, but let me ask it anyway, is that When we hear about these kinds of projects, no doubt as MEC for Education, you would want these projects to be completed on time. You would have wanted those kids to be in those classrooms really from 2019 when this school was projected to have been completed. The concern we have, MEC, is that often these inflated projects run into political slush funds. And people look at a project like this, and for all the glowing reviews you may have of it, and people shake their heads and they say, how is this not yet another example of politicians eating? What's your response to that?
Politician eating what?
Public funds.
I have no idea of any politician eating public funds. So it will be very much unfortunate of me to say a comment on any matter of that nature. However, as an MEC for Education, like you have correctly said, it will be my view and my firm view that for every, a project of this nature where we are building the school for our learners, it will be our firm view that at a specified time that they will be ready, they should be ready. However, personally or as a department, we might not have, a power over the challenges that the technicians or the department might be experiencing in terms of making sure that the particular project is completed at the particular time that has been agreed upon. But of course, it is our firm view that when the time is being given, those projects must be handed over to us for us to continue with our teaching and learning.
Appreciate your time, Education MEC in Mpumalanga, Lindi Masina.
702
The Big Interview
with Bongani Bingwa.
Listening to that interview is Ayanda Sishi-Wigzell, who is a communication manager for Equal Education. Ayanda, we've invited you to be part of this conversation because you look at issues more broadly. And although we started with Mpumalanga as an example, there are many other provinces where things are equally as troubling. I mean, this particular example of the Mkhondo School, I mentioned all the reasons given for the delays. At some point, the project was paused because they had to wait for water licenses from another project, from another province, KZN specifically. And I'll start with a question I ended off with the MEC. Inflated projects often turn into slush funds for politicians. People will say, when something like this happens, it's difficult not to believe it's not yet another example of politicians eating.
Good morning to the listeners of Radio 702, and good morning to you, Bongani, and thank you for this opportunity for giving us this interview. The reason why I'm sounding this perplexed is because I'm trying my best to not be shocked by what I've heard coming from the MEC. But just to say that there is corruption across the country. It's endemic when it comes to these kinds of projects. And so we can't say that the Department of Basic Education is removed from that corruption. Although we will say that at this point in time, it's alleged because we have not seen any evidence. But when you look at the numbers, especially when it comes to these inflated projects, the missing funds that are taking place, the fact that it took so years almost for these schools to be built, you often wonder what happens to those funds that were allocated. Where is the money going to? The fact that more money has to be poured in, but there's no accountability as to why it is that there was money that was lost in the beginning, at the start of these projects, when the budgets is being allocated for these different schools. Of course, we are happy that schools are being built, but they need to be built at a larger rate and make sure that the money that we are putting in is actually used for the public good.
Yeah, I mean, think about this, R500 million in addition to the projected costs at the beginning. How many more schools might have been built with that money that has gone into escalations for this one? Let's talk Gauteng now. For example, I can think of 7 schools that remain incomplete in this province, despite almost R1 billion being spent on those projects. How do you interpret that as equal education?
not the lack of building of schools really leads to a systemic issue that we have in our country. It leads to overcrowding. It leads to lack of school admissions, which means that learners do not enter into schools as easily because the schools that are already available in place are not necessarily schools that are conducive to letting learners in because they're already dealing with overcrowding. So in Gauteng in particular, but I won't speak necessarily about Gauteng, but just focusing on the overcrowding issues that are taking place in the Gauteng province. We have schools that are built in order for them to hold a certain number of capacity of learners, right? Once we have an overcapacity of those learners, that puts a strain on the resources, the furniture, the equipment that is already existing in those schools. We already have a learner to teacher ratio as well that is extremely it's low, which means that there are high numbers of learners, but there are not enough teachers to allocate those learners in those schools, which results in classroom overcrowding. So when you add lack of resources, lack of infrastructure, classroom overcrowding, that is a recipe for disaster. And so when we are looking at overcrowding in particular, when you're looking at the lack of schools that are being built, it is the correlation, it correlates the lack of schools versus the school overcrowding at the same time.
I hear you, Ayanda. My concern is when there are monies allocated either to repairs or even building, and money is spent, but those jobs remain incomplete. Surely that's a concern.
It is a huge concern, especially because we have the Public Financial Management Act. We have SCOPA in place. We have the Departments of Public Works. They are meant to provide oversight, as well as the Departments of Basic Education, as the ones who are needing this work to be done. It is a huge concern because this money could be used to allocate towards infrastructure, towards making sure that norms and standards are put in place in schools, to make sure that there are libraries, there are science laboratories, to make sure that children are actually going to school safely. So these monies that are being allocated are not being used for the public good, which means that it is not being allocated to where it is supposed to be going, to the schools, to the learners, to the children. If you look at the cost of the cost that the Departments of Basic Education, especially in the provinces, are meant to pay per learner. So it's around 1,500 rand. Now it has gone down to around 900 rand per learner, which means that steadily over the years, especially over the decades, that cost has decreased. We also need to attribute this to the austerity budget that we currently have right now. So when we are in austerity, it means that our budget is going towards paying off debt. It is not going towards the public good, which is also another issue. But we also need to look at the implementing agents that are coming in. These are contractors. These are people who have been given the tenders in order to do this. And we need to make sure that there is consistent oversight and monitoring and evaluation that is not only coming from the Departments of Education, but also coming from civil society as well and our communities.
And I think part of the problem is that no officials are held accountable when these things escalate, when they remain unfinished or are even abandoned. I mean, in the Mkhondo case, the main contractor left the project. Money had already been paid over. Subcontractors refused to continue working because they hadn't been paid over. That money was never recouped, and you wonder where it goes. Ayanda Sishi-Wigzell is the communications manager for Equal Education.
Current events, developing stories,
Tough questions.
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.